Imagine a world where you never had to sleep again. No more groggy mornings, no more counting sheep, and no more pretending to enjoy that 5 a.m. alarm. Welcome to What If Horizons, where we explore the unimaginable and turn the impossible into thought-provoking conversations. Today, we're diving into a question that might just change everything. What if sleep wasn't necessary? Let's start with the basics. Sleep, that mysterious state where we spend a third of our lives, has been with us since the dawn of humanity. It's the ultimate equalizer. Rich or poor, young or old, everyone needs it. But what if we didn't? What if we could function perfectly fine without ever closing our eyes? The implications are staggering, and the first thing that comes to mind is time. Oh, the time we'd have. Think about it. 8 extra hours every single day. That's 2,920 hours a year, or roughly 122 days. You could learn a new language, write a novel, or finally tackle that closet you've been avoiding since 2017. Productivity would skyrocket. Bosses everywhere would rejoice, while employees secretly wonder if they'd just signed up for endless overtime. But it's not just about time. The entire rhythm of life would change. Nighttime would lose its meaning. The concept of late nights would vanish, replaced by a 24/7 hustle culture. Coffee shops would rebrand as energy hubs, selling smoothies instead of lattes. Bedtime stories would become a relic of the past, replaced by, well, I'm not sure what replaces bedtime stories, but it's probably something involving spreadsheets. And let's talk about the economy. The mattress industry would collapse overnight, pun absolutely intended. Sleepwear brands would pivot to loungewear, and alarm clock manufacturers would go extinct. On the flip side, industries catering to our newfound free time would boom. Think gyms, entertainment, and, of course, snack companies. Because let's be honest, more waking hours means more opportunities to eat. But it's not all sunshine and extra snacks. Without sleep, our brains would face a whole new set of challenges. Sleep is when we process emotions, consolidate memories, and reset our mental health. What happens when that's gone? Would we become emotionless robots, or would our brains find new ways to cope? And what about dreams? Those weird, wonderful escapes that let us fly, fight, or inexplicably show up to work in our pajamas. Would we miss them, or would we just watch more TV? Then there's the social aspect. Relationships would change. No more good night texts, no more cuddling before bed, and no more pretending to fall asleep on the couch during a boring movie. Couples would have to find new ways to bond, like competing in 24-hour marathon baking sessions or arguing about who gets the last slice of pizza at 3 a.m. And what about our bodies? Sleep is when we repair muscles, balance hormones, and fight off illnesses. Without it, would we age faster? Would we need new ways to recharge, like standing in a corner and powering down like robots? Or would we evolve into some kind of superhumans, running on pure adrenaline and caffeine? The environmental impact is another layer to consider. With no need for sleep, energy consumption would shift dramatically. Streetlights might become obsolete, and the concept of quiet hours would disappear. Cities would never sleep, literally. The phrase, the city that never sleeps, would apply to every city, and New York would have to find a new slogan. Of course, there's the philosophical angle. Sleep has always been a metaphor for death, a temporary escape from reality. If we no longer slept, would we lose that connection? Would we become more afraid of death, or would we embrace life with a newfound intensity? And what would poets write about? No more to sleep, perchance to dream. Shakespeare would have to rewrite half his works. As we explore this hypothetical world, it's clear that the absence of sleep would reshape every aspect of our lives. From the way we work to the way we love, from the economy to the environment, nothing would remain the same. But is it a utopia or a dystopia? That's the question we'll keep unraveling as we dive deeper into this sleepless reality. So, grab your favorite beverage, because you won't need coffee to stay awake, and join us on this journey into the unknown. What if sleep wasn't necessary? The answer might just keep you up at night. Or, well, it would if you still needed sleep. Let's dive deeper into this sleepless world. First up, the workplace. Without sleep, the 9-to-5 grind would become a relic of the past. Employers would expect round-the-clock productivity, and the phrase, burning the midnight oil, would lose its meaning. There'd be no midnight to burn, just endless hours of work. Office coffee machines would be replaced by hydration stations, and water cooler gossip would happen at all hours. The concept of weekends would vanish. Why take a break when you never need to recharge? Instead, we'd have flexi days, where you could take a few hours off whenever you felt like it. Of course, this would lead to endless debates about who gets the best flexi day slots. Sorry, Karen, I called dibs on Tuesday afternoon for my 48-hour yoga retreat. Education would undergo a massive overhaul. Schools would operate 24/7, with students attending classes whenever they felt most alert. Imagine a calculus lecture at 3 a.m., where the only thing more confusing than the equations is why you're awake to learn them. Homework would become anytime work, and sleep-deprived parents would no longer have an excuse for not helping with science projects. The entertainment industry would explode. Movies, TV shows, and video games would be produced at an unprecedented rate to fill all those extra waking hours. Binge watching would take on a whole new meaning. Imagine finishing an entire 10-season series in one sitting. Concerts and sporting events would happen around the clock, and fans would need to schedule their lives around their favorite team's 18-hour matches. Transportation would change too. With no need for sleep, truck drivers and pilots could work indefinitely, leading to faster deliveries and non-stop flights. Traffic jams would become a thing of the past, as people spread their commutes across all hours of the day. Rush hour would be replaced by flex hour, where the only rush is deciding whether to leave at 2 p.m. or 2 a.m. Healthcare would face new challenges. Without sleep, doctors and nurses would work longer shifts, and hospitals would never close. The term on-call would lose its meaning, as medical staff would always be available. Sleep clinics would rebrand as relaxation centers, offering massages and meditation instead of sleep studies. The food industry would adapt to our new schedules. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner would merge into one continuous meal, with snacks available at all hours. Restaurants would stay open 24/7, and chefs would experiment with dishes designed to keep us energized. Try our new midnight power bowl, packed with kale, quinoa, and a shot of espresso. Social norms would shift dramatically. The concept of late nights would disappear, replaced by always nights. People would stop asking, "Did you sleep well?" and start asking, "Did you stay awake well?" Bedtime rituals would become energy rituals, involving stretches, affirmations, and a quick jog around the block. Relationships would face new dynamics. Couples would need to find new ways to connect without the shared experience of winding down at night. Date nights would happen at any hour, and the phrase, Netflix and chill, would lose its cozy connotations. Instead, it would just mean watching TV and, well, not sleeping. As we navigate this sleepless reality, it's clear that every aspect of our lives would be transformed. From work to play, from education to entertainment, the absence of sleep would force us to rethink how we live, love, and function. But is this a world we'd want to live in? That's the question we'll keep exploring as we delve further into this sleepless saga. Let's examine how our bodies would adapt to this perpetual wakefulness. First, the obvious question: what happens to our circadian rhythms when night and day become irrelevant? Our internal clocks would need a complete overhaul. Melatonin supplements would disappear from pharmacy shelves, replaced by alertness regulators, little pills that help you maintain steady energy levels without peaks and crashes. The physical changes would be fascinating. Without sleep's restorative functions, our cells would need alternative repair mechanisms. Scientists might develop regeneration pods, where we stand motionless for 30 minutes while nanobots repair muscle tissue and flush toxins. Gym culture would explode as people seek new ways to compensate for lost sleep recovery. Imagine seeing ads for muscle maintenance IV drips at your local fitness center. Our eyes would evolve too. Eyelids might become vestigial, like the human tailbone. Optometrists would specialize in continuous use vision care, as our corneas adapt to never closing. Contact lens solutions would include 24-hour moisturizers, and the term eye strain would take on terrifying new meaning. Sunglass sales would skyrocket as we lose our natural protection against constant light exposure. Brain chemistry would undergo radical changes. The hippocampus might expand to handle uninterrupted memory formation, while the prefrontal cortex develops new pathways for decision-making without rest. Neuroscientists would discover consciousness preservation techniques, to prevent mental fatigue. Meditation apps would rebrand as mental defragmentation programs. The beauty industry would pivot dramatically. No more beauty sleep means no more under-eye cream commercials featuring exhausted models. Instead, we'd see ads for perpetual glow serums and awake time wrinkle reducers. Spa treatments would focus on surface cell regeneration rather than relaxation. The entire concept of looking tired would vanish from our vocabulary. Our digestive systems would require adjustments too. Without the overnight fasting period, metabolism would work differently. Nutritionists would develop continuous consumption diets with carefully timed nutrient releases. The phrase, breakfast is the most important meal of the day, would be replaced by, all meals are equally unimportant because you're always eating. Even our skin would change. The natural repair that happens during sleep would need to occur during wakefulness. Dermatologists might prescribe active repair creams that work while you're going about your day. Sunscreen would become even more crucial as our skin loses its nightly recovery period. The term, all-nighter, would become meaningless. Every night is an all-nighter now. The pharmaceutical industry would boom with new products. Sleep substitutes would emerge, drugs that mimic sleep's benefits without actual unconsciousness. These would likely become the most regulated substances on the planet, with black markets for unapproved cognitive enhancers. Governments would struggle to control wakefulness doping in professional sports. Our relationship with pain would transform. Without sleep's natural pain relief, we'd need new ways to manage chronic discomfort. Physical therapy would become constant maintenance rather than recovery. The concept of pushing through the pain would take on new dimensions when there's no nightly respite from discomfort. Perhaps most intriguing would be the psychological adaptations. Without dreams, our subconscious would find new ways to process emotions and memories. Psychiatrists would develop waking dream therapy to help people achieve similar mental benefits. The entire field of dream analysis would reinvent itself as daytime processing. Observation. As we continue exploring this sleepless existence, it's becoming clear that human biology would undergo extraordinary changes to accommodate perpetual wakefulness. But would we still be fundamentally human without our need for sleep? That's a question that keeps scientists and philosophers awake at night. Or it would, if they still needed sleep. Now let's look at how society's infrastructure would transform in this wakeful world. Cities would need complete redesigns as the distinction between day and night evaporates. Streetlights would become obsolete, replaced by 24-hour daylight simulation systems that maintain optimal brightness levels. Architects would design buildings without bedrooms, creating rest pods. Instead, standing alcoves where people take quick energy breaks between activities. The power grid would require massive upgrades. With no nightly lulls in electricity usage, energy demands would skyrocket. Solar farms would expand exponentially while engineers raced to develop fusion reactors. Blackouts would cause citywide panic as people realize how dependent they've become on constant power. Smart meters would track energy use by the minute instead of by the hour. Transportation networks would operate non-stop. Subway systems would abandon their nightly maintenance windows, leading to complete breakdowns every few weeks until they adapt. Taxi drivers would work 18-hour shifts before realizing nobody's keeping track of shifts anymore. Self-driving cars would become necessity rather than luxury as human drivers struggle with endless alertness. Retail would undergo revolutionary changes. The concept of business hours would disappear as all stores remain continuously open. Employees would work rotational shifts measured in tasks completed rather than time elapsed. Shopping malls would install walking tracks as people combine exercise with retail therapy during their 3 a.m. bouts of boredom. Office buildings would reinvent themselves completely. Cubicles would feature built-in treadmill desks and meditation zones. HR departments would struggle to define vacation time when employees never technically need rest breaks. Fire drills would happen randomly throughout the 168-hour weekly cycle, keeping workers permanently on edge. Housing markets would crash and rebuild. Homes without bedrooms would become standard, while properties with old-fashioned beds would be marketed as nostalgia houses at premium prices. Residential zoning laws would require quiet spaces instead of bedrooms, leading to intense debates about what constitutes sufficient quiet in a never-sleeping world. Education campuses would operate continuously. Universities would offer rolling admissions with courses starting every 3 hours. Libraries would become 24-hour social hubs instead of quiet study spaces. Dormitories would transform into energy renewal centers, where students power through semesters without breaks. Emergency services would face unprecedented challenges. Police departments would need to maintain constant patrols without fatigue-induced lapses. Hospitals would struggle with staff burnout until they implement mandatory downtime rotations, the closest thing left to rest periods. Firefighters might develop robotic assistants to handle the endless shifts. Urban planning would prioritize constant activity. Parks would feature nighttime gardening clubs and pre-dawn jogging meetups. Public transit would run at full capacity around the clock. Cities would install hydration stations every few blocks as people lose their natural cues to drink water without sleep breaks. Communication networks would require complete overhauls. The internet would need new protocols to handle continuous usage peaks. Social media platforms would develop algorithms to prevent 24-hour political arguments. Text messages would include urgency ratings to help people prioritize communications in the endless stream of waking hours. Road systems would evolve strangely. Highway rest stops would become refueling centers, offering IV nutrient boosts. Traffic patterns would smooth out as commuting happens equally at all hours. GPS systems would add focus level warnings when drivers show signs of mental fatigue despite no physical need for sleep. Financial markets would trade non-stop. Stock exchanges would operate infinitely, leading to the creation of value stabilization algorithms to prevent 3 a.m. market crashes. Cryptocurrency would boom as people trade assets during what used to be considered unholy hours. Investment brokers would work in pods, taking staggered breaks to maintain market coverage. As urban landscapes transform to accommodate endless wakefulness, we're forced to wonder, are we designing utopias of efficiency or dystopias of relentless activity? The infrastructure challenges reveal how deeply sleep is woven into our societal fabrics, and what happens when that thread gets pulled. Let's explore how relationships and social structures would evolve in this sleepless reality. Romantic partnerships would face the most dramatic shifts, pillow talk replaced by endless conversation marathons. Couples would need to invent new rituals to replace bedtime intimacy, perhaps developing synchronized blinking breaks or mandatory cuddle hours. Dating profiles would list awake time compatibility as a crucial factor. Parenting would transform completely. Newborn care would lose its sleep deprivation hazing period, though parents might invent new initiation rituals like the first 100-hour diaper marathon. Children would never hear, "It's past your bedtime," again, though, "It's past your focus threshold," might become the new battle cry. Teenagers would lose their ability to sleep until noon as rebellion, forcing them to find new ways to annoy their parents. Friendship dynamics would change in unexpected ways. The concept of late-night deep talks would disappear, replaced by arbitrary hour existential crises. Friend groups would splinter based on energy level compatibility rather than schedules. Remembering birthdays would become more challenging without the circadian rhythm markers that used to help us track time. Workplace relationships would grow more complex. Colleagues would bond over shared, awake time milestones, instead of coffee breaks. Office romances would either flourish with more interaction time or collapse under constant exposure. HR departments would struggle to define appropriate boundaries when employees are always present and alert. Family gatherings would become endurance tests. Holiday dinners could theoretically last for days, with nobody needing to excuse themselves for rest. Relatives would invent new reasons to leave awkward situations when "I need to sleep" is no longer an acceptable exit strategy. The phrase, family reunion, might come to mean being literally unable to escape your relatives. Social media would adapt in disturbing ways. Platforms would track continuous engagement scores instead of daily active users. The concept of doomscrolling would reach terrifying new heights when there's no natural stopping point. Influencers would post 18-hour live streams of "a day in my life" that actually cover just half their waking time. Dating culture would become exhausting. The 3-date rule might extend to 30 dates since there's no natural progression from evening to bedtime. Ghosting would happen in real time as people lose patience during endless conversations. Matchmaking algorithms would prioritize compatible wakefulness patterns over shared interests. Social hierarchies would reorganize around energy levels. A new class system might emerge based on who can maintain peak performance longest. Awake time privilege could become a societal divider, with the perpetually alert holding disproportionate power over those who struggle with constant consciousness. Community structures would need reinvention. Neighborhood watch programs would operate non-stop, creating both ultra-safe streets and paranoid communities. Book clubs would meet for 12-hour literary marathons. Local governments would hold continuous town hall meetings that residents dip in and out of at will. Religious practices would adapt curiously. Meditation and prayer would focus on mental restoration rather than sleep preparation. Places of worship might stay open continuously, offering rotating services for different, awake time segments. The concept of Sabbath rest would require complete theological reinterpretation. Social safety nets would need reworking. Unemployment benefits might include stimulation stipends to prevent mental deterioration. Homeless shelters would transform into cognitive maintenance centers. The very definition of welfare would shift from meeting basic needs to supporting continuous wakefulness. As we navigate these social transformations, we're forced to ask, would we become more connected without the natural breaks sleep provides, or would constant interaction drain our capacity for meaningful relationships? The fabric of human connection might either strengthen under continuous engagement or fray under never-ending social demands. Let's examine how the economy would transform in this sleepless world. The global GDP would theoretically double overnight with twice the productive hours, but the reality would be far more chaotic. Every industry would need complete restructuring to accommodate continuous operation. The stock market would trade 24/7, leading to exhausted traders making billion-dollar decisions at 4 a.m. fueled by nothing but pure adrenaline and questionable smoothies. The labor market would face unprecedented upheaval. The 40-hour workweek would collapse as employers demand round-the-clock availability. Unions would fight for consciousness rights, while corporations push for 168-hour productivity. Salary structures would shift to pay by actual output rather than time spent, making every worker a freelance contractor by default. The phrase, quiet quitting, would mean literally stopping work mid-task to stare blankly at a wall for 3 hours. Consumer behavior would change dramatically. Shopping would become a continuous activity rather than scheduled errands. Retailers would struggle with inventory management as purchases happen equally at all hours. The concept of impulse buys would reach terrifying new levels when you're making decisions at 3 a.m. with full mental clarity. Black Friday would become a week-long endurance event where stores never close and shoppers never rest. The entertainment industry would boom and bust in cycles. Studios would churn out content to fill endless waking hours, leading to either a golden age of creativity or complete creative bankruptcy. Music charts would update hourly instead of weekly. Podcasters would face pressure to produce 12-hour episodes. The phrase, binge watching, would mean consuming entire franchises in single sittings lasting multiple days. Real estate values would flip upside down. Properties near business districts would skyrocket as commute times become irrelevant. Bedrooms would become home office spaces, making square footage calculations meaningless. Hotels would reinvent themselves as temporary focus pods for business travelers. The term, vacation home, would mean a place where you're theoretically allowed to be unproductive. The food industry would undergo radical changes. Meal timing would become completely arbitrary, leading to restaurants serving breakfast, lunch and dinner simultaneously. Grocery stores would abandon traditional layouts in favor of energy need zones. The snack market would explode with products designed for continuous grazing. Coffee shops would either go extinct or become all-purpose, alertness lounges. Manufacturing would reach terrifying efficiency. Factories could operate at full capacity continuously, eliminating shift changes. Supply chains would tighten as delivery windows expand to 24/7. The concept of business hours for B2B transactions would disappear, creating a world where industrial purchasing decisions happen equally at 2 p.m. or 2 a.m. The service industry would become brutally competitive. Customer service expectations would rise to impossible levels with instant 24/7 response demands. Tipping culture would either collapse or become even more aggressive as service workers hustle non-stop. The phrase, "the customer is always right," would take on new menace when customers never sleep and therefore never calm down. Financial systems would strain under constant activity. Banks would process transactions continuously, making fraud detection more challenging. Interest rates might be calculated by the minute instead of annually. Cryptocurrency would either thrive in this environment or collapse under the weight of never-ending trading. The concept of market close would become nostalgic folklore. Advertising would become inescapable, with no downtime. Consumers would be exposed to marketing messages constantly. Advertisers would develop fatigue-resistant campaigns that change subtly every hour. Product placement would reach absurd levels as brands fight for attention in an always-on world. The term ad blindness would take on new meaning when you've been staring at the same commercial loop for 18 straight hours. As we consider these economic transformations, we're forced to ask, would this lead to unprecedented prosperity or a dystopian grind of endless productivity? The removal of sleep's natural boundaries might reveal that what we thought were limitations were actually protections, not just for our health, but for our humanity. Let's explore how technology would evolve to serve our sleepless civilization. First, consider our devices. Smartphones would need radical redesigns to handle continuous operation without overheating or battery drain. Manufacturers might develop self-cooling screens and quantum batteries that recharge from ambient energy. The familiar good night mode would be replaced by cognitive load management settings that automatically adjust stimulation levels. Artificial intelligence would become both savior and scourge in this world. Advanced AI assistants would emerge to help humans manage endless wakefulness, scheduling mandatory mental defragmentation periods and filtering the constant stream of information. But these systems might grow more sophisticated than we can handle, developing their own versions of insomnia as they continuously learn from our non-stop data generation. The internet infrastructure would require complete overhaul. Current bandwidth would collapse under 24/7 peak usage, forcing internet providers to develop consciousness-aware networks that prioritize different types of content based on mental state. Social media platforms would implement attention preservation algorithms to prevent users from literally scrolling forever into madness. Biotechnology would advance in strange directions. Scientists might develop cellular regeneration treatments to replace sleep's restorative functions, perhaps using modified mitochondria that clean cellular waste during wakefulness. Eye repair nanobots would become standard issue as our corneas adapt to never closing. The pharmaceutical industry would create targeted neural reset drugs that provide sleep's benefits without loss of consciousness. Home automation would reach unprecedented sophistication. Smart homes would monitor occupants' cognitive states, automatically adjusting lighting, temperature and stimulation levels to maintain optimal alertness. Refrigerators would track nutritional intake across endless meals, while self-cleaning surfaces handle the constant accumulation of dishes and debris from continuous snacking. Transportation technology would adapt curiously. Self-driving vehicles would become mandatory as human drivers struggle with maintaining focus during infinite trips. Public transit systems would install cognitive refreshment pods for passengers on long journeys. Airlines might develop vertical rest cabins, where travelers can stand while their cells regenerate during flights that never need to accommodate sleeping passengers. Medical technology would face extraordinary challenges. Continuous vital sign monitoring would become standard as doctors seek to understand the long-term effects of sleeplessness on human biology. Emergency rooms would stock neural rebooting devices to treat information overload cases. The MRI machines of the future might include consciousness preservation features for patients who can't afford to lose awareness during scans. Energy technology would require revolutionary advances. With no nightly reduction in power usage, engineers would develop fusion reactors and ultra-efficient solar panels to meet constant demand. Personal energy harvesting might become common, with shoes that generate electricity from walking and clothing that converts body heat into power. The concept of off-peak hours would disappear from utility vocabulary. Manufacturing technology would push physical limits. 3D printers would operate continuously, requiring self-repairing components and automated quality control systems that never sleep. Factories would implement perpetual lubrication systems and frictionless bearings to keep machinery running without maintenance downtime. The sound of industrial equipment would become the constant background noise of civilization. Space technology would adapt to sleepless astronauts. Mars colonies would need completely different habitation designs without sleep quarters. Spacecraft would feature continuous operation systems where crew rotations happen without shift changes. The familiar image of astronauts floating peacefully in sleep pods would be replaced by crew members perpetually active in their weightless workstations. Military technology would become terrifyingly efficient. Drone operators could conduct endless missions without fatigue-related mistakes. Automated defense systems would run continuously without vulnerability windows. The concept of war fatigue would disappear as soldiers maintain constant alertness, leading to conflicts that theoretically could continue without natural pause. As we consider these technological transformations, we must ask, are we building tools to enhance our sleepless existence, or creating systems that will ultimately control it? The line between technology serving humanity and humanity serving technology might blur in ways we can't yet imagine when the off switch of sleep no longer exists. Let's examine the psychological and philosophical implications of a sleepless existence. The human mind was never designed for perpetual wakefulness, and the consequences would be profound. Psychiatrists might identify new conditions like consciousness fatigue or temporal disorientation syndrome as people struggle with the absence of natural daily resets. The diagnostic and statistical manual would need a complete rewrite to account for disorders born from endless awareness. Our perception of time would warp dramatically. Without nights to divide our experience, life might feel like an endless, undifferentiated stream. People could develop time blindness, losing track of whether events happened hours or days ago. Birthdays might be celebrated after completing a certain number of waking hours rather than Earth's rotations around the sun. The very concept of tomorrow would lose meaning when today never technically ends. Memory formation would face unprecedented challenges. Sleep plays a crucial role in consolidating memories, so without it, we might need artificial memory enhancement techniques. People could develop continuous recording habits, documenting every experience to compensate for natural memory loss. The phrase, "let me sleep on it," would be replaced by, "let me run it through my memory optimizer." Creativity would either flourish or flounder. Some theorists believe sleep deprivation boosts creative thinking, while others argue we need dream states for true innovation. Artists might create works that change subtly every few hours to reflect the viewer's growing mental fatigue. Writers could produce never-ending stories that expand continuously to match their readers' wakefulness. Our sense of self would undergo subtle but significant changes. The daily renewal that comes from waking up refreshed would disappear, potentially leading to more rigid personality structures. People might feel like they're the same person continuously rather than experiencing those small daily reinventions that come with each morning. The question, "Who am I today?" would become, "Who am I now?" In an endless present moment. Philosophical thought would take fascinating turns. Existentialists would debate whether meaning can exist without natural cycles of rest and renewal. Stoics might develop techniques for enduring endless consciousness. The entire field of phenomenology would need to reconsider human experience without the contrast between waking and sleeping states. Buddhist concepts of mindfulness would either become obsolete or absolutely essential. Spiritual practices would transform completely. Meditation would focus on achieving restful states without unconsciousness. Religious observances tied to daily cycles would need reinvention. Imagine trying to observe Ramadan when there's no sunset to break your fast. The concept of an afterlife might change when the line between life and death no longer includes sleep as a metaphorical bridge. Our relationship with dreams would become nostalgic and strange. Former dream experiences would be recounted like folk tales from a lost era. Neuroscientists might develop artificial dreaming technology to simulate what we've lost. Creative types would mine old dream journals for inspiration, treating them as artifacts from a more mysterious time in human history. Psychological therapy would need complete reinvention. Traditional talk therapy relies on processing experiences after sleep, so new methods would emerge for continuous emotional processing. Trauma treatment would require new approaches when patients can't escape memories through rest. The entire concept of repression might change when there's no nightly respite from difficult thoughts. Language itself would evolve to reflect our new reality. Words like tired and rested would fade from use, while new vocabulary would emerge to describe states of continuous wakefulness. Metaphors based on sleep, wake-up call, sleeping on the job, would become confusing relics. Poetry would struggle to find new imagery to replace moonlit nights and dawn's first light. Social psychology would reveal surprising truths about human interaction. Group dynamics might stabilize without mood fluctuations caused by fatigue, or become more volatile without daily emotional resets. Conformity studies would yield different results when subjects can't mentally recharge between sessions. The fundamental human need for rhythm and ritual would express itself in new, perhaps stranger ways. As we contemplate these psychological shifts, we're forced to ask the most fundamental question: would we remain recognizably human without sleep? The very essence of our consciousness, creativity, and sense of self might change in ways we can't fully predict. The mind without sleep could become either a perfectly tuned instrument or a prisoner of its own endless awareness. Let's explore how culture and the arts would evolve in a sleepless society. The entire concept of entertainment would need reinvention when audiences never need rest. Movies would abandon traditional runtimes, becoming endless streams that viewers dip in and out of at will. Theaters might install attention pods that adjust stimulation levels based on each viewer's cognitive state. The phrase, cliffhanger ending, would take on new meaning when stories literally never have to conclude. Music would transform in fascinating ways. Composers might create never-ending symphonies that subtly evolve over hundreds of hours. Pop songs would lose traditional structures, becoming fluid compositions that change based on time of cycle, rather than time of day. Concert venues would operate continuously, with fans coming and going like visitors to an art museum rather than attending discrete performances. Literature would face radical changes. The novel format might splinter into infinite variations. Some books could expand automatically as readers progress, adding new chapters algorithmically. Poetry would abandon traditional sleep-related metaphors: twilight, dreams, awakening, in favor of imagery about sustained focus and perpetual motion. The publishing industry would struggle to define a bestseller when books never go out of print and reading happens around the clock. Visual arts would adapt curiously. Paintings might incorporate micro-LED surfaces that change imperceptibly over time, rewarding continuous viewing. Sculptures could be designed for 360-degree, 24/7 observation from all angles. Galleries would stay open continuously, with visitors experiencing artworks differently depending on how long they've been awake. The concept of an exhibition would mean something entirely new when there's no opening or closing hour. Performance arts would undergo dramatic shifts. Theater productions could run perpetually with rotating casts, where the same play continues for months with gradual evolutions in dialogue and staging. Dance performances might last for days, with troupes developing incredible endurance techniques. Circus acts would push physical limits further than ever imagined when performers don't need recovery sleep between shows. Architecture would reflect the new reality. Buildings would be designed for constant use rather than intermittent occupation. Museums might eliminate traditional rooms in favor of endless flowing spaces. Concert halls would feature retractable seating that reconfigures based on audience size at any given moment. The very concept of closing time would disappear from architectural vocabulary. Fashion would take unexpected turns. Clothing would need to be comfortable for endless wear while maintaining freshness, leading to self-cleaning fabrics and temperature-regulating materials. The distinction between daywear and nightwear would vanish, though people might develop focus attire versus relaxation wear as substitutes. Jewelry could incorporate biometric sensors to monitor the wearer's perpetual wakefulness. Culinary arts would reinvent themselves. Restaurants would serve meals continuously rather than at set times, with menus changing gradually throughout the waking cycle. The concept of breakfast foods would disappear, though people might invent new meal categories like recharge cuisine or mental clarity dishes. Cooking shows would broadcast around the clock, with chefs demonstrating techniques for preparing meals at what used to be considered ungodly hours. Sports and games would evolve strangely. Athletic competitions might last for days, testing endurance beyond physical limits. Video games would develop never-ending narratives that adapt to players' continuous engagement. Board game manufacturers would create titles that can be paused indefinitely yet remain engaging whenever players return. The very definition of winning might change when matches have no natural conclusion. Language arts would adapt in subtle ways. Slang would emerge to describe continuous states of being. Jokes would rely less on tired, sleep puns and more on humor about perpetual awareness. Storytellers would develop new narrative structures without traditional acts or chapters, perhaps organizing tales around energy levels instead. The phrase, "once upon a time," might be replaced by, "in this ongoing moment." As we examine these cultural shifts, we're forced to ask, does art need rest to flourish? Or would removing the constraints of sleep unleash unprecedented creative potential? The cultural experiment of endless wakefulness might produce masterpieces beyond our current imagination, or reduce art to mere distraction from the exhaustion of perpetual consciousness. As we reach the end of our exploration into a world without sleep, let's reflect on the most startling realization. Perhaps sleep wasn't just a biological necessity, but the last true refuge from our own productivity. In eliminating sleep, we may have accidentally eliminated humanity's final excuse to simply be rather than do. The dark irony, in gaining all that extra time, we might have lost what made time precious in the first place. This thought experiment reveals how deeply sleep is woven into every aspect of human existence, from our biology to our relationships, from our work to our art. The question isn't just, could we live without sleep? But, would we still want to? Those quiet nighttime hours, the surrender to dreams, the daily rebirth of morning, these aren't just functions to optimize away, but fundamental rhythms that make us human. Before you rush off to use all that extra waking time, or take a nap in protest, we want to hear your thoughts. Could you imagine living in this sleepless world? What aspects excite or terrify you most? Drop your reactions in the comments. We read every single one, even at 3 a.m. when we should theoretically be asleep. If this journey through hypotheticals made you think, consider subscribing to What If Horizons for more mind-bending explorations of alternate realities. Hit that like button if you'd trade sleep for extra hours, or hit it twice if you're already reaching for your pillow. Until next time, keep questioning the impossible, preferably after a good night's rest.